Coming up on this episode of the Delta Huddle Podcast.
Really where we have had to really spend a lot of time is, okay, what's next? How are you going to maintain momentum? What's going to help you transform? And that's making sure people going into this change are aware. Do they have that desire? So they're bought into it so that when you do bring that concept to them, like beta testing, they're open-minded. Because you can have the greatest process, you can have the greatest idea improvement, but if that person or team you're speaking to isn't bought in, doesn't matter. You can have the greatest thing ever, but if they don't know why it's important or they're not bought into it going into the conversation, forget it.
Welcome to the Delta Huddle Podcast by Centercode. I'm Stefan Centers. Today's guests are Joe Ghali and Ryan Cantwell, principal trainers and consultants from the 280 Group. Joe and Ryan have a combined 30 years experience in product management, helping teams from Fortune 100 and 500 companies become more transparent, collaborative, and vulnerable. Now, today's episode is all about the intersection of product management and beta testing. And while it may seem obvious at first that beta testing naturally fits into product management, there are a lot of project managers who try to avoid beta testing or just see it as another box to check during the development process. And really, that can't be further from the truth. Joe and Ryan shared some excellent insight during this episode, talking about how important it is to listen to your customers and your end users, why it's incredibly valuable to be vulnerable, and what it truly means to be launch ready. Also joining Chris, Rader, Joe, and Ryan during this podcast was John S. Little, Senior VP of Product Marketing here at Centercode. He also had some wonderful insights to share about our journey to developing our own PLG product and what it meant to develop a platform for free beta testing forever. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and without further ado, here is Joe Ghali and Ryan Cantwell.
Joe, how did you meet 280 Group? How do you get into 280 Group specifically?
Yeah, actually, so I worked for Kimberly-Clark. So they're based in Neenah, Wisconsin. So I'm based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so the short story is I was interviewing for a product manager role at Kimberly-Clark, and the recruiter was like, you're kind of overqualified. And I was like, that's all right. And she's like, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And at that point, I've been coaching U12. I've been coaching my daughters in softball since they were 3 years old. And I said, if I could find like that ideal job, it would be a product coach. I've done this for a long time. Is there such a role? And she goes, actually, we have this team at Kimberly-Clark called the Product Transformation Office, and we have a product coach role. Is that something you're interested in? And I just was like, that was like a sign. It was like a light bulb just like shined on me like at that moment, right? And so the company that actually trained or got Kimberly-Clark their framework was the 280 Group. And this is when COVID was happening. So 280 was actually launching their DPM class, which is Digital Product Management. And they actually asked me to be actually coincidentally, a beta customer.
Oh.
You see that? See how I tie it all in? And so this is no joke. And so I really enjoyed the class. I love the instructors, the exercises and the engagement. And so they started inviting me back to product roundtables and other webinars and podcasts and writing blogs. And so there was an opportunity a couple of years ago for a product principal consultant and trainer. And I just said, this is my jam. This is where I want to be. And like Ryan said, I haven't looked back, and it's been the fastest 2 years of my career. I can say that for a fact.
Yeah. Ryan, what was your introduction to 280?
Yeah, so as I kind of accidentally fell into product management, I always say it happened. I didn't go find it; it found me, and I really became a student of the discipline. I wanted to learn everything I could about it, and the 280 Group hit my radar in those early days of product management. I had a colleague who took 280 Group courses, so I was in tune, and I started using some of the resources as a product manager when I was an acting product manager. And I kind of graduated, climbed the corporate ladder, if you will, and through business. And I was very fortunate to find an opportunity. The 280 Group was looking for a consultant and trainer. And one thing led to another where I applied, I interviewed, and here I am. I'm in the seat, and I could not be more thrilled. I tell everybody who will listen, guys, that it's too much fun to be work. Like, I enjoy it so much.
It's so funny. John and I worked at Western Digital before we came to Centercode. So we were on the beta testing team, the beta program. There was about 20 people, and we were doing beta testing. And we looked at resources from Centercode. Centercode was like the de facto resource for beta testing. So we'd pull up infographics, we'd go through the blogs, we're like, okay, we love this stuff. We eventually talked to Centercode. They come and pitch to WD. And long story short, John and I end up joining Centercode. And it was that very same thing of it was kind of the way to use the knowledge that they were creating at Centercode and then apply it. And it just brought us in. I loved it. My favorite pitch for joining Centercode was, I'm never going to see so many beta programs ever, right? The same thing with product, right? You're never going to see so many products because you're consulting or coaching across all these industries, and it's just so diverse. And I was addicted to it. On the beta testing side, you get to see these things come to fruition a little bit further along. Less so in the design or scoping or analysis phase, but so many products, so many people, personalities. That's what kind of hooked me into Centercode. But it's so funny that there's that connection of product managers looking for this, and you use the resources and bridge the gap, and you join in. That's great. So I'm assuming you guys are doing a decent amount of coaching. What are the big things? What are the trends that you're trying to keep up with right now in product management that you're actively coaching on that you could kind of help people out there with product management?
Well, there might be this thing you guys have heard of before. It's called Chat GTP or GPT. Only once or twice. So that is certainly a hot topic among the circles, right? That we're running in. That in addition to, it's surprising in our position where we get to interact with a lot of organizations, just how much foundation building happens to really strengthen the skill of product management. Because so many stories, you heard mine and Joe's story, that we're like very small fish in a very big pond. Like, everybody's got a very similar story, it seems like, where they kind of found their way to product management. They didn't go to school to learn the discipline specifically. And building that foundation, particularly getting closer to the customer and understanding them better and then feeding that back to the organization, is something we work on a lot with our clients.
Joe, you actually mentioned it. You mentioned it earlier, that why, right? Like, you were so interested in the why. I think that's such a product management thing, right? Like, why are they doing it? And then you get to like investigate. And so it just popped into my head as soon as you said that, Ryan, if like you want to be closer to that customer, that why from Joe's original statement of what intrigued him to get into product is it's very telling. So Joe, what trends are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's in this marketplace, this economy, a lot of product managers, a lot of product teams are being asked to do more with less, right? Less, they're being asked to do more. Their time and the resources that they have at their disposal, they have less, right? Or they're being shared across multiple teams. And so it really goes back to what Ryan said about the foundation. It's, when Ryan and I sit down with a lot of these organizations and teams, they're tripping over themselves, right? They don't have clarity on roles and responsibilities. That is 95% of the clients, either I've coached or that I've worked with or worked at. You got to fundamentally get like the teams working together, right? Get that accountability squared away. And then, especially now where resources are so finite, is how do you spend your resource dollar in the most effective way? And so a lot of organizations could get away with a lot of hobbies. I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try this product out. Somebody has a really good idea. Let's build it. And then they're left scratching their head asking, well, I don't know why anyone didn't want to buy it. I thought it was a really good idea. And so really, like, this is an opportunity for a lot of companies to get back to the needs of the customer. Like, have we just forgotten about why they are buying our product? What brought them here? There's got to be other ways. There are other jobs to be done, pain points that we can address. And so, that's something that we're telling a lot of teams and a lot of organizations, like, hey, do you have a fundamental, basic way of getting to the voice of the customer? Start with that. And everything else will kind of flow much easier, because then you're building a story, you're building empathy. And I think even on top of that stakeholder engagement, I think where a lot of organizations are falling apart is they're bringing the stakeholders, their leadership in later in the process when, golly, they got to be bringing them in early. So that way, when it comes time to doing a beta test or doing a launch, everyone's kind of in lockstep together. They're like, yeah, let's do this. Let's go out and take care of our customers.
Yeah, you hit on so much that, oh man, I wish I could unpack it all just instantly.
We only got an hour. You got 3 hours. Right? I can talk your ear off. Are you kidding?
I'll go back to the first one because it's a really big topic, and we just wrote a nice content piece about it. The do more with less concept.
Yeah,
right? It's tough. There's layoffs, there's hiring freezes, there's budget freezes, and the people that are left are just required to keep everything going. We need to do better. We need to do. You need to get this product out. You need to launch it. It needs to bring in revenue, but you don't have as many people to help you do it anymore. So you need to manage this really well. And we have that same saying in beta testing. It's not everyone has a full-fledged team. Like, you don't have the beta program manager with a coordinator to help them go through the feedback or a support person. We're seeing data that supports product managers having to pick up and do beta testing themselves. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They might have to be able to kick some stuff over to a QA or an engineer or somebody, but they're having to go find these people and talk to them. And it's good. I think it's really good because that establishing the connection with your customer is huge, but it's a tall order, right? How am I supposed to do this with few resources? What's the advice that you're giving for people that need to do more with less?
Oh boy, Chris, you're nailing it. Speaking of trends and to that question, I see so often product managers are under more and more pressure to make more accurate decisions more quickly. Like, they have to do it faster. So increasing the probabilities for success. And that's what every business leader wants. And the recommendations we make to get you there are, you don't rely on instinct and opinion. You need fact and evidence to support those decisions, to be accurate and to act quickly, to kind of both of those areas. And those sources of information comes from so many different places. But what happens so easily is people focus on what they can control. Instead of looking outward, they look inward. And that immediately closes them off a little bit from very important bits of information, whether it's qualitative information that they collect from user conversations, observations, or qualitative information from formal UAT or a beta testing program or something. It's we need to be very open to this. And then it's up to the product manager. It's more of the art than it is the science to derive insight and meaning from it and turn it into something useful. So a lot of what we do at the 280 group is help guide people to those ways to collect it, but not only collect it, how do you use it and make it work for you?
Yeah. And even to that point, it's, people ask like what we deliver confidence, right? That you're making the right decisions. We're delivering the ability to assess risk. We're delivering the ability to be strategic, to build your strategic credibility within the organization. And, a lot of times the beta test or the beta program is an invaluable part of that strategy, because you're trying to mitigate risk and you're validating, it's that question we have in our courses is that we call the product market fit triad. Is it valuable? Is it viable? Is it feasible? And so what we're trying to do is validate is it valuable, right? Are we delivering on our promise? And so, I harp on this in our course and in our workshops of, hey, do you got a plan? And with that plan, do you have goals? Who's going to manage that? Who's going to take the feedback? And then what are your metrics? How do you know that you were successful? And it's that fundamental practice of discipline, you can basically apply it in every stage of the product management lifecycle. And beta testing is really no different. You just got to have a plan. Tell me why. Tell me who. How will you know? Did we get value from this particular exercise? Demonstrate that to me.
Curiosity. That's one of my favorite things. I think it's there's two, I'd say, personalities. I like passion and curiosity. I think are the biggest components to probably anybody in business, right? If you are asking those questions, you go investigate them, it's going to help you do whatever you need to. And we were just talking to Paul Chen. Actually, John and I work with Paul Chen. He was a product manager at Western Digital. He now is at Mattel and the engineering. He leads an engineering team. And we talked about how often we fall into that trap of thinking or assuming that we're the user, right? And it was like, John and I did this. John, we build products for beta tests. We were beta test managers. We did that stuff. And we just got into this. It's a dark place when you start saying, "Oh, I know, I'm the user," right? And that false confidence, or even that confidence, can be a little fragile, right? Like if you get to a point where you're being kept up at night, it's like, is this really right? Is this really the right product? Will I have product market fit? And then you're not sleeping so easy anymore. Having some connection to check is big. We actually just launched our PLG version, our product led growth version of our platform, and it was a big change for us. John, tell us about some of your sleepless nights and how we got beta to give you a little more ease going out the door with it.
Yeah, whenever we first were doing it, obviously we thought we had a good idea, and we, like Chris said, we were talking to the people internally, but until we started actually talking to people externally who were doing this themselves, other product managers, we got our beta version out, started getting feedback from them. I tell you what, that's whenever it gave us two things really. One, it gave us confidence, like you said, Ryan. We knew that our decisions were getting more accurate from the feedback coming in, but also it gave the whole team energy because we were actually talking to people who were doing this every single day. They were excited about what they were seeing, or they were frustrated by what they were seeing. It was no more like the day-to-day drudge of getting the product out. It was close to the end, but that feedback really was what drove the teams across the finish line. It gave them more energy than they needed. I mean, we ended up with the dev team wanting to make more changes than we wanted to make because they were excited to get the product in a better state because they were seeing the feedback from the product managers out there. And so that was really cool.
And John, what you're talking about is a primary philosophy of the 280 group. By learning, instead of the drudge, I think you called it, you just immediately shifted from outputs to outcomes, like hands down. Like you are now outcome focused, and it's exciting. Like I've seen teams that same thing happen, and that energy, like that is why I am enthusiastic about product management. Like that energy, it's so cool to see teams click and be fed by learning, and that learning translates to better teams, better products, better and happier customers in the end.
Yeah.
You underestimate the morale. You can't underestimate the impact in morale on the product team by doing that. It made me think of, we had a big beta program a couple of jobs ago, and we were talking about product readiness, and we identified we needed to do a demo site, we needed to do a certain type of reporting. The beta allowed us to identify all these extras we just didn't know we needed to do until we got it in the hands of an actual user. And the beauty was we got in front of our most skeptical group, and they were trying to pepper us and like, take care of that, got that. Oh, like it got to a point where I could go into a conversation with that client and I knew every single question they were going to ask me and I had an answer for it. Like there is nothing that just drives more passion and more excitement, knowing that you can go into a conversation like that, knowing that you know what's going to be asked of you and you have an answer for it because you did that deliberate beta testing from your product's perspective.
You know, Joe, and you and Ryan are both hitting on this here. One thing that product managers, at least I've seen, really have to have is that confidence. They have to have the rapport within the company. A couple of bad decisions can really set you back.
Go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. We always say, and as you guys know, any product manager, they're responsible for everything, but have authority over no one, right? And
Yes.
Any authority they have is earned. And that's, it takes work. It like, you gotta be careful about how you go about earning that trust and manage your stakeholders effectively. So whether you have people reporting to you or not, you're a business leader, product managers, and recognizing that is, I think, a great first step in saying, oh, I'm in fact a leader. I need to have some influence and earn my trust.
Yeah, I actually saw that, and I don't know if you guys subscribe to the product management subreddit, but they were talking about this. Someone said they got this harsh feedback, this negative. They thought it was negative feedback. It was a really cool conversation. And the person, their manager was telling them that they needed to communicate more. They needed to build better connections with their teams. And the person's like, oh, this is so negative. This is so rough. And everyone's like, this is a perfect. Yeah, do those things. Be great. Build those connections. Without those connections, you don't do much of anything as a product person. You're there to help make the decisions. You might have to pick up, get dirty a little bit, but you have a team that's building your product. You have a team that's mostly internally testing your product. If you're doing beta testing, you have customers testing your product or users testing your product. You're very reliant. So those connections are big. And that's it's important.
Well, you got to build that vulnerability. That was probably the lesson I learned early on as a product leader, is you don't know everything. A lot of companies think the product manager has to be like, the perfect product manager has all this experience in their industry. Maybe, right? Yeah. But I'd rather hire on attitude, communication skills, vulnerability, like trust, those softer skills. I can teach you the rest. That's easy to teach. I can't teach you to be a good communicator, to, be someone that you can be trusted within the organization. And I think you've got it. I mean, for me, being vulnerable was really hard. But once I started doing that, I was like, wait a minute, I have a team that can help me, right? There are areas where I'm going to have to come in and roll up my sleeves, but that beta program, maybe I can delegate that to a project manager, or maybe my business analyst or PO can manage that. I don't have to worry about it. Like just having that open dialogue and that trust and that connection with people, they have just as much stake in being successful as you do in many cases.
Yeah. I love that just the term, the vulnerability, being vulnerable to something. And I'll look at it in a different light. We have this joke amongst our customers and internally that we say, always be testing, right? Should always be testing. You always want to have that lifeline to customers. And I think it really applies to that always be learning component to it. So if you talked about launch readiness, and I love that topic. That's kind of what I wanted to kind of focus or hone in on this in this podcast. But the idea of, you might have learned something in market research or very early on, or you might have scoped a requirement really early, or you could have run into something technical, and 3, 6, 9 months from now, things could have changed. Technology could have opened up. Customers could change, and having the mindset to always keep learning, and I need to be curious, I need to be vulnerable, even if I'm a 2-year, 10-year veteran of product management. There's no way you're going to be a veteran that year on that user in this environment because it's new to everybody. It's always new. So what say you about launch readiness in that stage of learning for a product manager?
And to clarify, Chris, that stage of learning being towards the later end of a project or
Yes.
early?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
right. I'll call. Actually, give me some advice here. When we talk about launch readiness, we think it's maybe a couple months before you're going out the door. You're getting your product buttoned up. You're talking to your support team, your marketing team. You're getting all this stuff ready to go out the door. What would you consider the launch readiness phase of development?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the launch readiness phase should be exciting. And what it feels like is it should feel exciting. It shouldn't feel so stressful because you've got a checklist of things I got to get through these before we're ready to go. Because a good product manager has taken care of a lot of those things very early in the process. They're ready, and you're doing things to ensure that adoption numbers are going to be hit once you hit the market. You make sure there's not going to be teething pains that you see once it does hit the market, meaning operational readiness or the support features around the product, know what to do with it. And once it is in the world, you're mitigating, because they're gonna happen, arguments on is it a bug or is it a feature, those sort of things. You don't want those. But also we don't want to take our eye off the ball yet. We're not fully coasting. We don't want teams to move on too quickly to the next thing. No, it's our job to kind of, we're rallying. Like, okay, everybody, are we ready? Are we ready? Let's make sure we're good to go, and the product is meeting the expectations that we want it to meet. And Chris, like you said, if we've learned something very early, and now once we are preparing for launch and we do something like a beta, it's our dress rehearsal. We need to know, is the value proposition being delivered upon? So that's our opportunity then to do it, not after it's out in the world.
Joe, what's a ready launch look like to you? Like if someone's asking, how do I know I'm ready?
Easy questions, right? Easy questions.
Yeah, easy question. How much time do we got again? I look at different teams across the organization, right? I ask, if I have a B2C product, is my sales team ready? Right? Do they feel like they're armed to start selling this product? Are they confident? Is my support team ready? Are we at a stage where if a customer calls in, we're like, oh yeah, you know what? Oh yeah, this is how we're going to solve it for you. Or here are some techniques to help you along the way. Is my dev team ready? Right? So making sure that, all right, do we have agreement on Sev 1, Sev 2, Sev 3? What are we going to work on next? Are my stakeholders ready? Are they ready to take calls from somebody in the organization who maybe hasn't been paying attention? Like, when I think about that internal operational readiness, that's what comes to the front of my mind in terms of, are we ready to rock and roll? And sometimes I get a little greedy and, I'm looking for testimonials. I'm looking for quotes. I'm looking for those success stories, because there's going to be naysayers. And what I'd like to have happen is, it isn't Joe Ghali or Ryan Cantwell, running around the company saying, this is great. It's more like, hey, I have these other customers or other folks that have bought in that are kind of speaking on my behalf, where I know they're more likely to listen to them than they are to listen to us. Like, those are the, it's like the lady spinning the plates. You can use that in many different scenarios, but that's really what comes to mind when we talk about that, like, product readiness or that beta readiness from a product perspective.
That's a whole different type of challenge too. When you start working with other teams, I found that sometimes that last little bit, the change management, because people find change difficult. You're giving them something new they have to change, and trying to get through that can really be something else.
Oh, you're speaking my language, John. You're speaking my language. So one of my passions is change management. And so, we talked about some of the trends that we're starting to see. One of the biggest trends that's not talked a lot about, but we see it, is the WIFM, the what's in it for me. A lot of organizations are going to introduce beta testing. They're going to introduce a new product management framework. And there's just a lot of fatigue. There's different frameworks that have been introduced, right? People have probably gone through 3 versions of agile training by this point in their careers, right? If they've been working for 20 years. And so really what we're finding is it isn't so much convincing the product manager, it's how do we help them bring their leadership along on the journey? How do we help them bring the support team, the cross-functional teams, the shared services like accounting and finance, who aren't living in agile or who aren't living in product management, have buy-in? And so really where we have had to really spend a lot of time is, okay, what's next? How are you going to maintain momentum? What's going to help you transform? And that's making sure people going into this change are aware. Do they have that desire? So they're bought into it, so that when you do bring that concept to them, like beta testing, they're open-minded. Because you can have the greatest process, you can have the greatest idea improvement, but if that person or team you're speaking to isn't bought in, doesn't matter. You can have the greatest thing ever, but if they don't know why it's important or they're not bought into it going into the conversation, forget it.
Yeah. I know, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the specific term, but have you heard of dogfooding before?
Absolutely.
Internal beta testing, all that great stuff.
Yes,
so this
sir.
it was one of our favorite things. We were on the beta team, but we were like the product manager's best friend at Western Digital when we were there. And we employed our beta test program in a dogfooding capacity to get all those teams ready, to get that buy-in. So we went to our marketing folks. We went in to talk to regional sales managers rather than the individual salespeople. We didn't want them selling the new product yet, but the regional people could come up strategically with their stuff. But we went and grabbed those different teams. We got support teams. We had anybody that's going to be part of this product. And we brought them into a test and we got their feedback and they learned the product and we got that buy-in for that product because they got to use it firsthand. They had their voices heard, which everyone loves to, have their feedback listened to, and they got their concerns out of the way. They got to collaborate with each other and saying, "Oh, I've seen this on other products that we've launched, and this is what we could do for that." And it was, I love it. I love that buy-in that you can get from those different teams just by using something as simple as dogfooding. Has been around for decades at this point. Yeah, that's one of my big topics. I love talking about dogfooding. It's a great thing. So in terms of launch readiness, getting this buy-in, why is this important to a product manager? Why would this be important? Why do we need to focus on it? Why do we need to care about it? Why do we need to push for it?
Yeah, gosh, because if we don't, I always like to say what something is by saying what it isn't. So if we don't do that, we have underperformance. Like we've just made this big investment. It's not getting the traction we wanted. It's not hitting the metrics that we were hoping it would hit. And that's frustrating. And then everybody starts to point fingers and instead of being ready. So we do our readiness steps, hopefully early instead of too late, to make sure that we have something successful on our hands that's going to meet customer expectations. I know, gosh, and I think every product manager has encountered a situation like this. I know I certainly have, where we're so excited about our new product, like everybody in the company, and it goes, we like let it fly. And then all of a sudden, like you're expecting to see like the needle start to like quickly tick up, and it's like, it's not moving. What's happening? And then the sweat bullets start to form, and they start dripping down. It's like, oh no, why? And then the investigation starts and everything else. But readiness is helping make sure, one, your expectations are appropriately set. You have a firm understanding of what's going to come, and you know how to react when certain things happen. Like you're ready, as readiness implies. You're able to respond much more quickly to make sure you do have a successful product, and And we talked about learning, especially early in the process. You're always learning. You need to keep learning. And as part of the readiness phase, what little things can we pick up on now? What can we learn to help make that flywheel spin faster? Like is really what we want. And that's why readiness is so important.
If you don't have it, you end up, like you said earlier, Ryan, with the product manager being stressed out instead of calm at the end when it should be going out that way. And Joe, what you said earlier, this is what, like at the very beginning, it's what it at least sounded like to me is that recently there's a lot more like back to basics inside of product management, like getting back in touch with the customers, getting rid of those pet projects that somebody was just forcing people to run down. As our resources are getting more constrained, we're going back to what we know to be the successful formula.
Yeah, and it's that some of those basics include the fundamentals of let's just use data. Many times we go with our gut. And, a lot of great companies started that way. Somebody had a really good idea that was based off of data. And then along the way, they lost their way. And, to Ryan's point, beta testing represents a big data set. It helps to justify the why. Why did we think we were ready to launch? Well, because we identified these segments or these types of customers. We had these goals. We were able to measure it. We were tracking it. We knew coming out of it, if we got out of these beta programs, these are the results we're looking for, then we knew we were ready to start making it available to a broader audience. Like we're effectively turning into really credible and strategic storytellers in the organization. And again, it's painful the first couple of times, but the more times you do it, the less people are kind of, they're on top of you because they know, hey, when we launch our next product, Ryan's got it because he does his due diligence, right? And, one of the things that sometimes we miss is, beta testing is also a great way to build stronger customer relationships.
Oh, yeah.
They love if you got to frame it right, but they love being part of the beta because then they feel like they have input into the product. They feel like there's a little sense of pride and that, you talk about in this market, you got to take care of your current customers, right? And so one of the great ways to do that is you engage them in a beta saying, hey, I need your help. Let's partner up together. I want your feedback. And so not only are you mitigating your risk, but you're also building stronger relationships with some of your key customers that will help you get through trying times like the ones we're going through right now in our economy. It's if you do it right, there's a payback of 100 if you take care of those relationships, not only with your customers but their customers as well.
Yeah, I call that the inner circle. Let them in the inner circle, and whether it's Dogfooding, Chris, or whether it's a customer, make them feel special. Make them feel special. Like everybody wins.
Well, and it's not even you have to give them money off or give something for free. No, honestly, it's like that intrinsic. Make me feel like I'm an important customer.
That's big. We've done studies with our audience on that. So we have a Beta Bounds, our testing community. So there's over 250,000 people in there. So we've done the research into that, right? Like why are you testing? Number one, to get their feedback, to influence product, right? It's not to get paid to make money because you're not going to make a lot of money if you're just relying on beta testing. But I actually just had this content piece come out, and it was called The Hidden Value of Testers, to kind of help people understand that you may think a beta tester, a dog fooder, is just providing you issues, right? They're just going to help me find bugs. They're just going to kind of knock those things out and get them out of the way. I actually visualize it as an iceberg. That's the tip of the iceberg, is just the feedback that you get from them and how you use it in product. But the bottom of the iceberg is all the value they're providing as a great customer, as what we'd call an evangelist, an advocate for your product. Because when, for example, times are tough and you're asking do more with less, you don't have as much budget for advertising and getting your product out there. You know who's going to advertise for free? Your customer. Like when you say 10, 100 times more, that one customer that was like, you know what, I had a great time on that beta test. This product manager was super responsive to me, gave me feedback, I'm going to go tell my friends and family about it.
Yeah.
And then they're going to tell their friends and family. And then you just get this network of people that are talking about your product because you did a great job of including their feedback and letting their voice being heard. Without it, not only your beta test going to fail, but your product's going to struggle a little bit more because you're fighting upstream. What happens if you don't respond to them, right? If you have a customer that has a bad time, what do you think they're going to do?
Right.
Complain. They're not gonna be the advocate. They're gonna say, you know what, the team sucked at doing beta. They didn't want to hear my feedback. Why would I care about recommending this product to somebody else? So yeah, I love that.
Well, and the other part of it is, you know, a lot of sales teams are struggling right now, right? The duration, right, to close deals is longer. A lot of customers are ghosting the folks in sales, right? Because the purse strings are tighter. And so the secret sauce is, you know, engage with your customers, build that stronger relationship. And what I like to focus on is getting those testimonials and quotes and then arming your sales team. Like, I just got off a call with our sales team, literally right before this call. And they're like, we're really struggling for testimonials. Right? If I can just get more tangible examples of success that I can arm my sales team with, like in this time right now, I need proof. I need proof they're going to get an ROI. And so not only are you helping your existing customers, but you're also enabling, you know, getting some of those storytelling points, those data points that then you can help your sales team evangelize and arm them to help them, you know, be more effective at closing deals with new customers.
I think you're bringing up a really good point, Joe, as far as helping other teams out. Because product managers, even though they have very little authority, they sometimes get perceived as having a lot of it. And so sometimes a finger-pointing game can turn up really fast because sales like, you make all the decisions. Why are you giving me all this bad stuff? And when things get a little bit rough, it's easy to have that happen. When you're actively helping them and giving them the stuff they need and listening to them as well, it keeps that from happening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Proof in the pudding, right? We actually have one of our best practices for beta testing is to collect what we call is the 3 inherent types of feedback. So issues, ideas, and praise. Praise. That's all your testimonials. That's all the quotes. It's all the stuff that you need. And depending on the size of your test, like that's a lot of feedback. That's all the testimonials you need. And having run a few tests, it's my favorite thing because it's qualitative, right? And then you have some quantitative measurements on the back, like what their star rating was or their net promoter score in beta. You have sentiment kind of that you can look at. But one of my examples that I use is I was running a test on I'll say a grill. It was a smart grill, so I won't give the specifics. And it's the first time that we've kind of got into that field of smart grills. And I'm looking at this feedback, and it's praise, and they're talking about this is great, right? I love the ability to be able to control it remotely. And I popped in the feedback and said, hey, why was it important? Why is that important? He's like, well, I get to go spend time with my family, right? So I don't have to sit outside for 4 hours on this grill, making sure everything's cool. I can control the temperature from my phone. I can access it, and I can spend time with my family when they're here. And I'm like, wow. And I present that to the product team, and the marketing team's on. They're just like, everyone's throwing stuff. Like they were just, that was a little dramatic, but they were so excited. Like, can we get that and use it as a testimonial? We just walk out the door with a testimonial. And sure enough, you can get consent right there from your people. You can have a form coming in that says like a consent to giving praise. And it was so deep and qualitative and rich, and they ate it up. So those 3 feedback types are going to do you a lot of justice, because if you try to narrow it to one, they're all going to flood into one, and it's hard to decipher. But also the importance of responding to feedback, because testers might be a little shallow in terms of the quantity of feedback. But just by poking a little bit, the one simple, like, why is that important to you? Why does it matter? Can get you a big story that is super useful. That context is huge.
Yeah, I'm God, that makes me so happy, Chris, to hear that, because the conversations, product managers, I always encourage them to challenge their organization when they hear about a new feature, for example. the first 2 words out of your mouth when you hear about that feature should be, so what? Like, so what? What's the benefit? Like, and you can use this, your testing, like you said, that data is such a gold mine for, like, you can point to specific areas and get that. And like you said, your marketing team was throwing things. I love being dramatic. Like, I imagine a room full with confetti and champagne, but
it was a party.
Yeah, they're on a party. So, but like, I see then how much more effective are those messages that you're sending. So the customers are much more locked in to what it is you can do for them. And again, I mentioned the flywheel before. That is like, it's the snowball rolling down the hill. If I'm not using the flywheel, it's just you're collecting more good information to keep things going. And it's so exciting. There's that energy.
Yeah, that engagement, it's I say it's one of our the feedback types is a big structure configuration of your test. Responding to feedback, and I talked about this in the very first episode of the podcast. Responding to feedback is the number one advice I have for anybody. I don't care what tool you're using. I don't care how crappy your beta test is planned. Just respond to feedback. If you don't respond to feedback, why would anybody submit anything else? So you're going to see numbers just dip. You're not going to see engagement from people. They don't feel invested. They're not going to want to give you anything else. And they're, again, going to get a bad taste in their mouth and not want to, promote your product as much because you weren't there for them to serve why they even joined the beta test, to have their voice heard. All right. So I think we're coming up close to time here. Is there anything that you guys can give? Let's talk to a new product manager right now. Based on the trends, based on what we talk about, what's your one statement to them as advice? And we'll start with Joe.
Okay, I'm going to go basic because this is what I talk a lot about. There's so many components of product management. And, when we do our training, we talk about, at the end, we talk about what are the 3 key things you're going to take away? What are the first 3 things you're going to do? Because we introduce a lot, right? We arm them with so many tools and techniques and processes. My advice is look for progress, not perfection, right? Build up those success stories, evangelize those success stories, learn, build upon what you've done, and just continue that momentum. And I do that a lot with a lot of newer product teams that I work with. Is I'm not asking you to be amazing in 1 month or 3 months or 6 months. Like, focus on your customers, understand the why, but look for those tiny acts of discovery. Look for those tiny success stories and evangelize them.
Ryan?
Yeah, so my short bit of advice for a new product manager is really nail down and understand the difference between outcomes and outputs. Like, understand it, because if you can focus on the outcomes, you're gonna hit home runs. It's gonna keep you, Chris, I think it was you that said it earlier, it's gonna keep you curious. It's going to get you closer to the customer. It's going to naturally lead you down so many fruitful paths instead of kind of like keeping your head down and maybe focusing on some of the more internal things or more tactical things. You'll be more strategic as a result. It'll make a difference. So outcomes, not outputs, is my advice.
And John, you got a new product manager starting soon. What's your advice to her?
But it's going to be, and this is just broader, coming off what Joe and Ryan said, but always keep the customer in mind. And remember, you have more than one customer. You have your internal customers and your external customers. You have to keep them all in mind as you're releasing the product.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and John, you said you have a new product manager starting. Send him my way. I'm doing a class in August in Milwaukee. I'll get him, or the individual. I'll get that person ready to go for you, buddy. Just let me know, okay?
I believe you will.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I feel like that was a really good conversation, and I'm really hoping for all you new or seasoned product managers out there that you got something you can walk away with. There's a lot of nuggets here, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you, fellas.
Thank you for listening to the Delta Huddle Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a like or a 5-star rating. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next episode, and happy testing.